So, the first season of the Netflix Messiah show just came out, and I just watched it, ready to bash it as, stupid or blasphemous or whatever. But I gotta admit, it's actually a pretty good show. I'm not sure about the message here. I don't know if it has like a moral message. But looking at it as a TV show and in terms of quality, you can't deny that it's a pretty good show. And it's one of those shows that you have to basically binge watch because they don't have self-containing episodes. I usually hate that because they intentionally do that just to keep you watching. But in this case, at least for me, it really worked. It did keep me watching, and it kept me interested. Now, so far, I haven't said anything about the story, because there actually isn't too much of a story. Or rather, the story can be summed up with the title, Messiah. Just put a question mark there. Messiah? Question mark? And yeah, that basically summarizes the entire story, because basically the entire plot is just about, keeping you guessing of whether or not that alleged Messiah is actually the Messiah or not. And not just you as the audience, but also the other characters in the show. They're guessing along with you, or rather you're guessing along with them. And that, as a summary to a plot, that might sound pretty boring, but it's actually rather intriguing. And actually, he doesn't even call himself the Messiah. It's just that some of the characters in the show believe him to be the Messiah, and then there are some others who don't and think that he's a charlatan and so on. So the show hints in both directions, and the entire time the show keeps us guessing as to whether or not he really is some kind of Messiah or is some kind of fraud. But that's not actually the really interesting thing. The really interesting thing is, the point is not whether or not he is the Messiah. The point is how the people react to that. Both the characters in the show and we as an audience. And the reactions of the characters actually kind of mirror the reactions of the audience, with some people getting really outraged and saying, they're mocking our religion. But actually it wouldn't even be clear what religion that would be, because it's not even about any specific religion, because he himself actually never identifies with any specific religion. And his followers in the show are from all the religions. Well, okay, not really literally all the religions, but actually they did put in an effort to make that point, because if you look closely, you can see among his followers, you can actually see people among his followers from all the religion. There's even a Buddhist monk there. And there are some rabbis, and of course there are even more Jews and Muslims and Christians. So it's never about any specific religion, yet still people from specific religions get offended. But of course all religions have some concept of a Messiah. So it's always interesting to see how people react to someone who actually claims to be a Messiah, even if it's just in a TV show, and even then he doesn't actually claim that himself. And even then it still gets a lot of people offended. But both the characters in the movie as well as the actual audience. There have already been many outcries from various people, from various religions and non-religions, and a lot of people already hating on this. And I think the people who react that way, they must not have even watched the movie, the show, because that's actually what the show is about. It's about how people precisely react to someone like that. Because, like I said, all the religions have that concept. So, wouldn't it be interesting if there would actually be a TV show that would explore what that would be like, or how people would react to that? But no, even then, people get offended. It's really weird. I can understand some people. And, that's the real interesting thing, is people's reactions. Whereas the question of whether or not he actually is some kind of Messiah isn't really important. I mean, of course, if it would be in real life, it would be an important question of whether or not you would actually be following a real Messiah or some kind of fraud. In real life, of course, that would be an important question. But within the context of the movie, it's really not that important. What is much more interesting is precisely people's reactions to it. And I think in that aspect, the show did a really good job. I don't know if it did a good job in portraying a potential proclaimed Messiah, but it did an excellent job in portraying people's reactions to such a claim. And that's where it really shines and where it gets really interesting, because by their reactions to that, people actually expose a lot about themselves, about their character. And that's where the show is actually very interesting and sometimes rather deep character study. And as that, don't see it as a religious movie, even though it's probably more of a religious movie than many of the so-called religious movies nowadays. But see it as a character study, and as a character study, it really does an excellent job. So now that actually concludes my review. I really highly recommend you to watch this show. It's excellent. It's so well done, and it keeps you captivated. So go check it out, and stop listening to me now, because as always, I have to do a bit of an analysis, because hey, that's kind of what I do. So I will try to analyze the show. And of course, I will also try to explain the obvious pressing question of whether or not he really is the real deal, or is he a fraud? I'm gonna try to answer that question. So if you haven't watched it, stop listening now, because obviously they're gonna be spoilers. Well, actually, they're not really going to be spoilers, but because ultimately we don't know the answer to that yet, because the show isn't finished yet. It's only the first season that came out, and I don't know how many seasons there will be. So the show hasn't conclusively answered that question yet. But I will try to analyze the first season and try to see if we can at least kind of predict in what directions it might ultimately go. So obviously, in case I'm in the unlikely event that my predictions turn out to be right, you better stop listening to me, because then if I'm right, then there will be spoilers. And based on what I can tell after having seen the first season, their original plan at least seems to be, I mean, of course they might still change that, but it seems that their original plan is that he's gonna turn out to be neither, meaning he's basically gonna turn out to be neither a fraud, nor the real deal, nor, so neither is he the Messiah, nor is he a fraud. So in a sense, the entire question was kind of a red herring, because that's not the real issue is, of course, people's reactions to it. But other than that, even then, that's not the real question we should ask, because I really think he's going to turn out to be neither a fraud nor the Messiah. So you're thinking, well, what other option is there? Well, the obvious third option would be the Antichrist. I'm not necessarily saying that that's actually, gonna be the conclusion. I'm just saying that there are third options, and the most obvious one of that is the Antichrist. Because, especially in Islam, but also in pretty much all other religions, but let's use Islam as an example, because it's particularly clear in Islam that according to Islam, the Islamic version of their Messiah would not appear unless the Antichrist would appear also, or would actually even appear first. And you do have that kind of concept in pretty much all religions. You always have a sort of messianic figure, but at the same time, you also have someone coming down or coming up with more sinister intentions, and oftentimes they are predicted to come at the same time, so that that one would guide people and the other one would lead people astray. So that's why now there are a lot of theories out there that think that he might actually be the Antichrist. But of course, that's not actually the only possibility. But it's obvious that he cannot be a fraud, at least not in the usual sense, nor can he be the actual Messiah. And at least in my opinion, after having watched the first season, because, well, obviously, he cannot be he cannot be a fraud in the usual sense, because he performs a lot of miracles, so to say. Now, of course, those could be staged, and at least a lot of them, but all of them, and also, he does survive two natural disasters. He survives a plane crash. He resurrects people from the dead, and so on. Sure, some of those could be staged, but all of them unlikely. So I'm not completely ruling out that he's a common fraud. But I think at this point it's actually the most unlikely explanation, because he could still be a fraud, but in order to pull off everything that we see him do, he would actually have to have some kind of special powers that actually would kind of border on a supernatural. So he could still be a fraud, but a fraud with some really extraordinary abilities that, yeah. So that's exactly why some people say that he might actually be the Antichrist, because obviously he has some extraordinary, even supernormal powers. So he definitely can't be some common trickster, some common fraud, that's actually pretty much already ruled out if you think about what the first season shows us. So he would definitely be some kind of, he could still be some kind of, he could still be a superhero or a or a super villain, But this doesn't strike me as a show with superheroes or supervillains. So since The Ordinary has already been pretty much ruled out, it really does only leave the supernatural, and since this is obviously not a show about superheroes and supervillains, it only pretty much leaves him, at least being in some way supernatural. Now, the first season isn't yet clear on whether or not that supernatural force is a good one or a bad one. So he might be the Antichrist. He might also be, his supernatural powers might also have a more benign source. He might, we don't know what his plan is. His plan could be evil. Or, it's not, I don't think his plan in any case is purely good, because there are definitely some bad aspects there, that's obvious. Not necessarily with him himself, but definitely with the people around him. So, since it only leaves the supernatural, basically he's either, he either has those supernormal abilities because there is some good and benign force behind him, or maybe some evil force. But actually, it doesn't even have to be one or the other. It could also be, maybe he really is the Messiah, but he this time, maybe he hasn't been sent to save people, but to judge people, or maybe, maybe he isn't any savior at all, or any Messiah at all, and maybe he doesn't come from any entity or God, but he just has, just has those extraordinary abilities for some reason that will be revealed in the future, and maybe his intention is neither extremely evil nor extremely good, but somewhere in between. Actually, I think it mostly hints to that. I think in either case, it's somewhere in between, because even if he would be the Messiah at the very least, and he says that quite clearly, and it's made quite clearly in context, that this time he pretty much has been sent to judge people. So again, the important question isn't actually whether or not he is a Christ or an Antichrist, because either way, in this case, he would actually be doing pretty much the same thing, judging people. Or rather, it's not even he himself that judges people. People kind of judge themselves, precisely by how they react and what choices they make. And he actually has that effect on people. He has the effect of simply bringing out what people try to hide. But there were some people who have everyone, both in real life and in the show. No one is perfect, and everyone has made some mistake at some point. But then there are those people who try to hide those mistakes and try to continue making the same mistakes and think they can get away with. And then there are the people who feel regretful and want to change. And no matter if he turns out to be a savior or a demon even, or some supervillain, he has the effect of well, exposing people for who they truly are. They sort of expose themselves in their they sort of expose themselves in their interactions with him and in their in the choices they make.